Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and this is episode 41. And today we're going to take a look at the Actors Equity Association. But first of all, I want to give a big shout out to my listeners. So let me go to my list here and take a look because you guys are awesome. Let me see here. So a big shout out to Massachusetts, Texas, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York. Thank you so much, guys, for listening in. You guys are awesome. So let's go ahead and get started on this puppy here. This is the Actors Equity Association, as said before. It is known as AEA. It was formed May 26th, 1913, quite a while ago. That's really neat. Its type is a trade union. It is headquartered in New York City, New York. And when I was looking this up, it showed a picture of their building or where they currently are, like their storefront in New York City, New York. And it was really neat looking. I would love to go see it. The front of it, it reminds me of those awards that people are given at the Tonys or, what's the other one? It's one of those red carpet events. Oh, Oscars or something. It's just the shape of it that reminds me of one of those awards. It looks really neat. Anyway, they are headquartered in New York City, New York. Location is only in the United States. I'm glad to see that because, it's not located in Canada or Panama or someplace else. Its location is in the United States. As of 2021, they have 50,785 members. That's awesome. Now, when I first saw that number, I thought it was low. But we'll see why it's low in just a little bit. And when I say it's low, I don't mean that disrespectfully. What I'm saying is that we have seen from other previous labor unions and associations that their memberships are quite high. But this one is lower, and we will see why, because this is more of a niche. It's more of a specialty. And so what I was concerned about when I was initially looking at the Actors Equity Association was that there'd be like millions of members in it because so many people want to be actors and actresses, but not many people actually are actors and actresses. They just say, oh, I'm in theater, I'm in movies or something, but you don't know who they are, you don't know their name, you've never seen them before. So it kind of, it makes me, I don't know if the right word is appreciate, or it makes me kind of think this is more legit if they don't just let in anybody and everybody kind of thing. Like you have to actually be who you say you are and what you do in your profession kind of thing. Because it seems like everybody wants to go to Hollywood and get rich quick and be popular. And hey, that's a great goal, great ambition. Have a passion. That's wonderful. But not very many people actually succeed in that. So I'm glad to see that these numbers are not just astronomical because it tells me that it's more legit, if that makes sense. But anyway, their president is Kate Schindel. The executive director is Mary McCall. They have affiliations with the AFL-CIO, Associated Actors and Artistes of America, and the International Federation of Actors. So we'll probably get to those later. But let's go ahead and jump into this one here. It says the Actors Equity Association, also known as AEA, commonly referred to as Actors Equity or simply Equity, is an American labor union representing those who work in live theatrical performance. Performers appearing on live stage productions without a book or through storyline, vaudeville, cabarets, or circuses may be represented by the American Guild of Variety Artists. The AEA works to negotiate and provide performers and stage managers quality living conditions, livable wages, and benefits. A theater or production that is not produced and performed by personnel who are members of the AEA may be known as non-equity. So they have some specifications here, like they're very specific about what they look for and what they call different people. So that tells me that they're serious about what they do. That's really good to see that, because if you're going to join something, be serious about it. Don't just half bleep it. I mean, I could use a different word, but don't half bleep it. A little bit of background here. Leading up to the actors and producers strike of 1929, Hollywood and California in general had a series of workers' equality battles that directly influenced the film industry. The films, the Passaic Textile Strike, 1926, the Miners' Strike, 1928, and the Gastonia Textile Strike, 1929, gave audience and producers insight into the effect and accomplishments of labor unions and striking. These films were set apart by being current documentaries and not melodramas produced for glamour. In 1896, the first Actors Union Charter was recognized by the American Federation of Labor as an attempt to create a minimum wage for actors being exploited. Now, I agree with that. No one should be exploited, and they should have decent wages, because somebody's got to make that money. So it might as well be the people who are actually doing the work. That's what I say. It goes on to say, it was not until January 13th, 1913, that the Union Charter failed. It later reemerged as the Actors Equity Association with more than 111 actors, with Francis Wilson as its founding board president. A little bit of history here. At a meeting held at the Pabst Grand Circle Hotel in New York City on May 26, 1913, Actors Equity was founded by 112 professional theater actors who established the association's constitution and elected Francis Wilson as president. Leading up to the establishment of the association, a handful of influential actors known as the Players held secret organizational meetings at Edwin Booth's The Players at its mansion in Gramercy Park. A bronze plaque commemorates the room in which the Players met to establish Actors Equity. Members include Frank Gilmore, who from 1918 to 1929 was the executive secretary of Actors Equity, and its eventual president, a position he held from 1929 to 1937. Now this I will give him credit for. At least he wasn't president like the entire time. Because what we have seen from other organizations and other labor unions and other associations is that sometimes these people get into power and they never leave. They can't get rid of them. And unfortunately, that leads to dictatorships within those organizations. We're not seeing that here with this. So that actually is a good thing to see, that yes, he did start out as executive secretary, but he didn't stay there. He went into becoming the president. So it's nice to see that there is kind of a change in management. So that's always really good to see that. Goes on to say, Actors Equity joined the American Federation of Labor in 1919 and called a strike seeking recognition of the association as a labor union. The strike ended the dominance of the Producing Managers Association, so they're battling with somebody else, including theater owners and producers like Abe Aranger and his partner Mark Claw. The strike increased membership from under 3,000 to approximately 14,000. The Chorus Equity Association, which merged with Actors Equity in 1955, was founded during the strike. So sometimes you have these associations that pop up almost out of nowhere, but sometimes they pop up out of pockets, so to speak. They're similar in what they do, but they're also very specific in what they do. So sometimes it's good to see them merge, because they sometimes will have better bargaining rights. I'm not saying that gives them permission to be bullies and to pull things, to pull shenanigans, as they say, but sometimes it helps to, how do I word this? It helps to know who you're fighting against and who you should join, if that makes sense. It goes on to say, Equity represented directors and choreographers until 1959, when they broke away and formed their own union. That's probably a good thing, because actors and directors and choreographers are not the same. Those are three totally different job functions and three totally different job titles, and they want different things because they do different things. So sometimes you do need to be on your own and figure out what you want to do, as opposed to just blending in all the time, because sometimes when you blend in with other people, you lose your identity, you lose your calling. So I'm always in favor of individualism, and then once you know who you are as an individual, then you can associate and, I guess, mingle with other people that you're like-minded. But when you have those three different types of professions trying to be under the same umbrella, I can see why it did not work out, because they don't think the same. Next, we're going to talk about the 1929 nationwide actors and producers strike threat. It says the actors' equality strike was a series of walkouts that started in 1927, which started out in smaller local theaters in Los Angeles, but quickly grew to the motion picture stage. During the series of nationwide walkouts, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences started issuing contracts for freelance film actors, which led Hollywood's actors and actresses to fear the loss of their jobs. The theater strikes, combined with freelance contracts, fueled the need for actors and stagehands to strike for better working conditions and pay. Frank Gilmore, the head and treasurer of the Actors Equity Association, understood that he would need multiple unions across the country in order to make a change in not only proper representation and pay, but in the ability for actors to be able to negotiate any contract that any studio would put out worldwide. On July 20th, 1929, the Actors Equity would gain its first victory, which would give producers and actors a leg to stand on in their battle for equality. Over the course of 30 days, Gilmore fought to give the Actors Equity the ability to be the main representation of all actors, producers, radio personality, vaudeville performers, and agents in the country. This would also give all power and representation to one organization in order to create a more organized equality strike. Starting June 5, 1929, Gilmore attended several meetings in New York with the heads of Broadway. After the meeting, Gilmore notified Actors Equity that appearances in sound and talking motion pictures had been suspended until the outcome of the meetings with the International Studio Crafts Union. Due to the negotiations and the suspension of contracts through Actors Equity, studios were desperate for actors to speed up production, which had dropped significantly. The New York Times stated it was pointed out that while the equality regulations were in effect, about 2,000 motion picture contracts involving salaries said to amount to $500,000 were offered to actors in New York. Any actor that was to partake in any contract not approved by the Actors Equity would be banished from the union and would have to reapply for admission after negotiations were finished. That's kind of extreme. So we've got some fussiness going on here. It says by December 1929, the Actors Equity Association was negotiating terms to reset the movie stage under better conditions. But this was the least of their problems. In late December, groups of theater owners as well as non-represented producers filed lawsuits to claim damages done by the Actors Equity Association's contract holdout. The plaintiffs not only seek a temporary injunction against the defendants, pending trial on an order to show cause why a permanent injunction should not be granted, but also ask damages of $100,000. That's a random quote put in there. I don't know where it's from. It doesn't say, but the point is people were out of work. They were losing money because the thing is, when you are producing a movie or a play or anything like that, when you're not working, you're not making money. So basically, production stops, but people still have families. They still have bills. So they really wanted to get back to work. So I think you have a combination of some people wanting to strike, others did not want to strike, but they still wanted equality within their work environment and within their industry, within their craft. So they're trying to work out the kinks. But I think the mistake is trying to take it to court. Because here's the thing, if your industry is not up to par on labor standards and labor laws, then really how are you going to win a legal battle? So you kind of have to look at it that way in one respect, because sometimes court systems don't understand the American people, even though we are the American people and we help to build our social structure and things of that nature, but sometimes you get people in legislation that don't know what they're talking about and they don't know what they're doing. So you have to be careful who you vote in, because sometimes those people who are voted in are the ones that elect these judges or appoint them. And other times you are electing judges, I don't know, every so often. I can't remember how often we vote for judges here in Oklahoma. But it's really important that we as a nation pay attention to who we vote in, because sometimes they will appoint people that should not ever be appointed to anything. That's what I'm saying. So just be careful with that. That's just kind of a side note. It says this section is about effects of strike. It says the Actors Equity Association allowed small numbers of contracts to be negotiated over the next few years. In 1933, the Screen Actors Guild was created and took the place of AEA as the main representative for movie actors and producers. This allowed the Actors Equity Association to focus its efforts on live productions such as theatrical performances, while the Screen Actors Guild focused on movie production and non-scripted live performances such as minstrel, vaudeville, and live radio shows. And it says here, in the 1940s, Actors' Equity stood against segregation. And if you think about that, that's 20 years before legislative law took effect to desegregate our schools. So the Actors' Equity was about 2 decades before, in terms of taking a stand on something. They were trying to implement desegregation about 20 years or 2 decades before the federal government and before state governments wanted to desegregate schools. Because when they started to desegregate schools in the 60s and more along the lines in the 70s, it was pretty rough on people. Like, I have some relatives in my family that they remember the desegregation of schools here in Oklahoma, and it was rough. But if you think about it, desegregation should have happened the moment the Civil War was over, if you think about it. So we were kind of late in the ball game in terms of our society. But if you think about the Actors' Equity, they took a firm stand for something good. Now they're kind of crazy. But back then, I think they made better decisions. That's my personal opinion. It goes on to say, when actors were losing jobs through 1950s McCarthyism and the Hollywood blacklist, that was in regards to them being concerned about communists being in Hollywood, which they were there. Actors' Equity Association refused to participate. Although its constitution guaranteed its members the right to refuse to work alongside communists or a member of a communist front organization, Actors' Equity never banned any members. At a 1997 ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of the blacklist, Richard Masur, then president of the Screen Actors Guild, apologized for the union's participation in the ban, noting, "Only our sister union, Actors' Equity Association, had the courage to stand behind its members and help them continue their creative lives in the theater. For that, we honor Actors' Equity tonight." So he's doing some grandstanding, is what that is. In the 1960s, Actors' Equity played a role in gaining public funding for the arts, including the founding of the National Endowment of the Arts. I did not know that. It says Actors' Equity fought the destruction of historic Broadway theaters. It played a major role in the recognition of the impact the AIDS epidemic was having on the stage. So I don't know if they're talking about, like, if there are a bunch of actors and actresses that got AIDS. I don't know what that really means. It says it played a major role in the recognition of the impact the AIDS epidemic was having on the stage. I'm guessing they mean that HIV/AIDS was becoming more and more common within Hollywood. I don't really know what that line means. But there definitely have been some actors, I can't think of any actresses, but there have been some actors that contracted HIV/AIDS. Well, they don't contract AIDS, they technically contract HIV, and then AIDS is the final stage of that virus, and that's pretty much when they're dying, is when AIDS is taking place. So I'm not really sure what that last sentence means. It doesn't really go into more detail. But it says here, going on to the next article or next paragraph, it says, there are 3 ways to become a member of Equity: through an AEA contract, EMC points, or via a sister union. If someone is offered a position under an AEA contract, they may join during the term of that contract. Alternatively, someone can become a member by generating a number of Equity membership candidacy points. This is done by securing a position at an EMC participating theater and then registering as a candidate for Equity. For every week they work at a participating theater, they accrue a point. Performers are required to earn a minimum of 25 weeks of EMC work along with a $400 initial payment in order to become an official Equity member. Someone can also become a member by virtue of prior membership in a sister performing arts union, such as SAG, AFTRA, AGMA, AGVA, or GIAA. To qualify through this means, someone must be a member of the sister union for at least a year, be a member in good standing at that union, and have worked as a performer under the union's jurisdiction on a principal or under 5 contract, or at least 3 days of extra background work. And it talks about their contracts a little bit. It says Actors' Equity has a number of different contracts with a number of different rules associated with them. Each contract type deals with a specific type of theater venue or production type. These include, but are not limited to, Council of Resident Stock Theaters, Guest Artists, Letters of Agreement, League of Resident Theaters, Small Professional Theaters, and Theater for Young Audiences. Actors and stage members within Actors Equity are not allowed to work in any non-equity houses or any productions in which an equity agreement has not been signed anywhere within equity's jurisdiction. Now, I disagree with this first part of that sentence. It says actors and stage managers within Actors Equity are not allowed to work in any non-equity houses. I would think that even if you're in a union, you should still be able to work where you want. That's one thing I don't like about unions, is that they pigeonhole you. And that bugs me, because to pigeonhole someone means you're preventing them from earning a wage. You are preventing them from labor. You're preventing them from earning a living just for the sake of jurisdiction battlegrounds. Or I was going to use a different phrase to describe that, but it's kind of vulgar. I will skip on that. But I just think it's wrong to do that. I would think that if you really cared about your members, you would do both. So if you can line up all this work for your members that are equity houses, then line all that up. But then if there's a gap in their employment or a gap in their contracts, let them go work someplace else in the meantime to fill in that space. Because not only does that give them a living wage, it gives them exposure. It basically gives them free publicity. It helps build their resume. It also helps build them up in their skill or trade. It helps them to grow in that. Because, like when you're acting in a comedy, that's not the same as acting in a melodrama or a drama. It's also not the same as being in a documentary or a biography. So you have all these different avenues of entertainment. So I would think that you would not want to hold them back. Because I think that when you hold someone back, you're literally limiting them and their future. And that's one thing I don't like about unions. It's kind of like when you're in a union, sometimes it's like, well, you're either with us or against us, or it's all or nothing. Well, I don't like those kinds of relationships. I find them to be very unfulfilling. I find them to be very unrealistic. And it always kind of feels like you're having to bow down to somebody else. And I don't like that, and I don't agree with that. Because if someone loves you and respects you, they won't ever treat you like that. They won't expect you to bow down to them. They will help pick you up. There's a difference in the mentality, and I hope I'm speaking that correctly or conveying it correctly, like what I'm trying to say. Because sometimes when I'm doing these podcasts, sometimes I feel like I'm stepping on eggshells, considering our society is still a little super sensitive about things. And other times I'm like, I just don't care. If I crack an egg, I crack an egg. But I want to be, kind and respectful of other people at all times as much as possible. But I do think it is wrong to limit someone's career, to limit their future, to limit their pay. Because I look at it this way, let's say, for example, you have, let's say Chris Pine. He is a very successful actor. He's very handsome. He's very talented. He has a really good experience. He's done all these different types of work. He's been in movies. I think he was in either a play or a Broadway production. I think it was a play, because I remember seeing him in an interview, and I apologize, Mr. Pine, I can't remember which one it was, but it was the one where you were on one of these talk shows. I can't remember if it was Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel, but you're being interviewed by one of them, and they were talking about your play that you were in, your theater production or something. And this lady yelled from the audience and said, "We can't hear you." And it was just so disrespectful. And I was just kind of shocked that someone from the audience in a performance or a play or a production would yell at the actors or actresses on the stage, because that is just such horrible etiquette. In fact, it's not etiquette at all. It's a type of blasphemy, if anything, in terms of acting. I mean, it's just very much disrespect. But it's one of those things that I've never forgotten that, because I think people need to learn how to behave when they attend things like that. Because I guarantee you, that woman, she probably ruined it for everybody else. But I wanted to use this analogy here. Like, say, for example, Chris Pine, he's very talented, very successful. He's been in movies, and theatrical productions and things like that, and possibly Broadway. I just don't remember what it was. But let's say, for example, he wants to go out and work, but he's a part of this union. I'm not saying that he is, but say, for example, Chris Pine is part of the Actors Equity Association, and he wants to go out and work, and he has an opportunity for a contract, but because Actors Equity Association doesn't have that contract, they forbid him or ban him from ever going out and doing his own work, even though it might be something he really wants to do. And say, for example, he needs to do it. I'm not saying he's broke. I mean, I have no doubt that he's very successful and everything like that. But here's the thing. We can't assume that just because someone is popular or handsome or looks successful, that always reflects their bank account. Like we don't know, maybe he got really sick or something and is having to pay off medical bills. Maybe he's helping his family through a financial struggle. Maybe someone in his family is fighting cancer, and those treatments, as we know, are not cheap. So I just think I look at the entire picture. If someone wants to go out and work, they have every right to do so. And who is anyone to get in their way? Because we can always judge someone by the surface and say, oh, they have everything they need. Chris Pine, he's handsome. He can have any woman he wants. He lives in a nice fancy house. He's very successful. He comes from a family of actors. What does he have to worry about? Why would he go look for a contract? He should only work where we want him to work. Well, I completely disagree with that. And I'm not saying that's happening. I'm just using that as an analogy. Especially, I'm using, a very popular actor, to try and grab your attention to swing this home. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter what we see on the surface of someone's life. They could be suffering behind that. And it's not our business. It's not my business. It's not your business. It's not even this association's business. It's not any union's business. But if someone wants to go out and work, even if there's not a contract in place, they have every right to do so. And I would think that if a union or an association or a labor union or a trade union, I would think if they really cared about their member, they would let them go work. And if anything, they'd be like, hey, let us negotiate that for you. If you want to have that job, do that project, give us the contact information. Let us call them and work something out. We would love to help you with that. But that's not what this association does. It tries to blacklist, but not for communists. It tries to blackball and blacklist people for wanting to work when this association does not always line up the right leads. They don't always line up the right contracts. But everybody has the right to earn a living. See, that's what I don't understand about labor unions sometimes and these associations. I think associations are more guilty of this than anything else. Excuse me. It's like they claim to care about people, but yet they get in the way of people finding work. But yet they are a trade union. So technically trade unions are supposed to be helping people get work. They're not supposed to blacklist them or prevent them from getting work. So I just really question the integrity and the intentions of any association or any trade union that blocks their members from trying to have a better life. Because technically, when you are going out to work, you are utilizing your rights to have labor and to be paid for that labor. And let me put it this way. Again, I'm not in a union of any type. If someone tried to get in the way of me getting a job because they're trying to ban me from working somewhere, I would totally sue them. I would totally sue them for everything for getting in my way of me getting a job or keeping a job. I would totally do that because to me, that is so cruel to prevent somebody from earning a living, because we all have a right to earn a living. I'm not saying we have the right to all make equal wages per se, like regardless of what you work. Like I'm not saying that, let's say for example Chris Pine, let's say for example he makes $150 million a year. Let's say he makes that a year. I pray that he does, that'd be awesome. But let's say, for example, you have somebody that's really extreme and says, well, we should all make that. Well, think about that. If you expect everybody, or you think everybody should make $150 million a year, which that would be great if that were feasible, if that were completely doable, but we're not all the same. We are all unique. I do believe in equal pay. That's different than equal wages. Equal pay is in regards to where you pay a woman the same as you are a man if you're applying for the same role or the same job and you have the same background. That's the thing there. But what I'm talking about here is that sometimes people will take it so extreme with these labor unions and these associations and say, well, everybody that's within our union or our association, if one of our members can make $150 million a year, then all of our people should make $150 million a year. But that's not realistic. That's not realistic or feasible because not every contract is the same and not every job is the same. It's just not. So you have these extremes. And I'm pointing this out because I think that if they're trying to ban their workers or their members from working, then that is yet another extreme that makes no sense, and it gets in the way of that person's destiny. It gets in the way of them being successful. And I know some people that have tried to get in my way of being successful, like they have sabotaged my job in the past, they've done some really cruel things. The best thing I could do is walk away and rise above it on that one. If I could have taken some people to court, I would have. But here's the thing. If someone's trying to block you from fulfilling your destiny, then they technically don't really care about you and they don't love you or respect you. So for an association to try and block its members from being able to work anywhere that they want, I find that really disturbing. And I'll give an example. I'll use an analogy. An example would mean that I have something very equivalent to it. I don't. I have an analogy. So this association saying that these actors or actresses, they have to only work where they have contracts, otherwise they're banned from the union. Well, that would be like telling me, I have a Visa card, right? So that'd be like Visa telling me that if you go shop for groceries, you can only shop at Target. You're not allowed to shop at Walmart because we think it's ghetto and that's where hicks go, even though that's not true at all. Well, that would be wrong. First of all, who in their right mind would tell a woman where to go grocery shopping? That makes no sense whatsoever. That's stupid because women aren't going to listen to that. But number two, that is exactly what this association is doing. It's controlling and manipulating a very specific population. Why? Because they are part of that association. Well, when you use your Visa card, I'm not dissing Visa, I actually prefer Visa as opposed to other cards. But let's say, for example, if Visa were to say, oh, you can only shop here, but you can't shop there. Well, that would pose very much a problem because they are controlling you. They're telling you where you can and cannot shop. Well, if Visa can't do that, and they're not supposed to do that by any means, why is it these associations and these trade unions get away with doing this in the exact same way but dealing with people's labor? And here's another thing. If they are blocking people from working, which is what they're doing when they ban people from working over a hissy fit over contracts, they are also affecting people's accessibility to health insurance. They are affecting how much they pay into Social Security. So here's another thing. If you're sorry, I need to get a drink of water. Hold on just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, I am back. All right, so what I was going to say was whenever you prevent somebody from working and they're not able to earn a wage, whether it's a living wage or not, so it doesn't matter how much money someone already has in their bank account, they still have the right to work and to earn a living wage. Also, when people are prevented, including actors and actresses, some of them may be stuck up, but some of them may be really nice, but it doesn't matter what we view or think of them. They're still people. They still have a right to work. They still should have the ability to support themselves, support their families, and also have access to food, water, and shelter. I could care less if they get Botox or go tanning or have breast implants or do this or that. That has nothing to do with earning a living. It has to deal with just being kind to people and treating someone how you want to be treated. It basically comes down to that, the golden rule. So it's very disappointing to me when the golden rule is not really practiced like it should be, especially in the workforce and the labor force. See, because here's the thing. When someone is prevented from working, they're not producing any labor, right? Because they're not working. Well, here's the other thing. If they're not able to work, or they're not able, sorry, let me correct that. If they're being prevented from working, they're not paying in to FICA, which you have Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then you also have unemployment tax, federal and state. So these people that are being prevented from working, they are especially not adding any funds towards their Social Security. And I'll explain how that works. Okay, so here's the thing. How do I word this the best of my ability? Okay, so Social Security, you get it once you reach like, I don't know, 62 or 65 or something. You can get it earlier, but you take a huge hit on how much money you won't get if you start drawing that money out early. But here's the thing. The way that you get those monies is by working when you're younger. So if you are not working as much, or if you are being prevented from working, technically that is affecting and will lower the rate of how much Social Security you will receive once you hit retirement based on federal law. So that's where that really bugs me, because I look at things from a black and white, yes and no, staff accountant, auditor point of view, because that's my profession. That's what I've predominantly worked in, and I've also worked in health insurance. I'm also a licensed insurance agent in the state of Oklahoma. So I look at legislation and I take it very seriously on this. So whenever you are preventing someone from working, you're technically practicing a form of discrimination, whether it's on the books or not, whether it's included in that federal law or not. That's technically a form of discrimination, and you're blocking that person from receiving the Social Security later in time that they should have received. So when someone's not able to work, let me rephrase that, when they're being prevented from working, whoever is preventing that person from working, they're technically willingly decreasing their Social Security check once they retire and start drawing on that Social Security. So basically, you have to pay into Social Security. Like, I know that, I'm 38, but, I don't know how old Chris Pine is. I think he's 41. I think we're 3 years apart because, I think he's an 80s baby, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but it's one of those things like, we still have some years to work, and I don't mean that negatively because work is fun. I enjoy my work. I have no doubt he enjoys his job as well. But here's the thing. I know that if someone was blocking me from working, I would be really irritated because I know how that affects Social Security. Because I know that whatever is taken out of your check, it is calculated by the government. And they know how much has been taken out, and they know how much you have paid in and how much you have not paid in. So here's the thing. Let's say we get to be 62, 65, whatever the age is when you can start drawing security. You might think you're going to get that full check. But here's the thing. If you haven't paid in all this time, or if you haven't paid in at the rate that you should have been paying in, then you're not going to get as high of a Social Security check as you would have. That's my point. Long explanation, but I don't think people realize, I drank a bunch of water way too fast. I don't think people realize that when someone is preventing you from working, they're not just affecting your current pay. They are affecting your future pay, including the benefits that you are promised by the federal government. That is a big problem when people block you from earning a living, because then not only are they blocking you here and now, they're actually blocking your pay way down the road when you're supposed to be retired. So you're not going to get as much money. So you will have to live off of less as opposed to live off of more. Does that make sense? I hope so. I know sometimes like my brain's trying to think like legislation, but then I'm trying to convey it, but then I'm thinking about, okay, how do things work here in Oklahoma as opposed to California or Canada or Panama or Puerto Rico or wherever, which technically Puerto Rico is a, what do you call it, territory or something. I don't even know why. Side note, Puerto Rico, they kind of have it all, but they don't pay taxes like we do, and they have chosen to stay a territory, and they're smart on that. But however, they get all this money from the federal government. They get a bunch of our tax dollars, but yet they don't pay in. Like, if that's not a weasel thing to do, I don't know what is. And usually they vote Democrat. They usually have a Democrat representative or whoever from there, and it's just like, wow, they really are living off of the hog, so to speak, and using us to support their resort-type lifestyles that they have out there, which I'm not a fan of. And a lot of this I did not know until it was brought to our attention, so to speak, about what was going on with Puerto Rico, and that they're not really paying their fair share. They're like NATO. They're like these other countries in NATO that don't pay their fair share. But yet they expect the American people to pay all their bills. Because there was some kind of, this was several years ago. I'm trying to remember what it was, because sometimes I watch C-SPAN. And I know you're probably thinking, you watch C-SPAN and you're in your 30s? Yes, I've been watching C-SPAN since I was a teenager. I love it. I love C-SPAN. Not that stupid book channel. The one where they show the Senate hearings, and they show how people vote and things like that, and you get to hear what people say on the floor whenever they're voting on stuff. It's really interesting because you really get to know who you voted for and who you did not vote for. That is for sure. And so I learned from one of those committee hearings or something they were voting on that Puerto Rico wanted all this money because their economy, they're basically overspending. Their economy is mostly, sorry, I'm a little tired. I work over 40 hours a week now, so I get home and I do these, or I wake up super early. I typically wake up around 4 or 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes I exercise. Other times, I get up, cook breakfast, and other times I get up and I pray. So I have kind of a different routine. It kind of depends on what I want to do, but I get up early, I work hard, I come home, and then I exercise. So I still need to exercise. I still need to do my HIIT training and some toning. But anyway, it was one of those committee hearings that they were voting on whether or not to give Puerto Rico more money. Of course, they always have some sad sob story, and it's like, look, you live in a resort type environment. Your main source of income for basically your gross domestic product, if that's the right way to describe it, is tourism. Well, I know a lot of people that go there, visit there, spend time there, spend money there. So it's like, if it's such a popular place, then how is it they never have enough money? Well, the reason why is because they're not balancing their books. They're not managing their money correctly. They're just using the 50 states of the United States as their personal piggy bank. They're basically using all the other citizens of the United States to pay for whatever they want because they basically operate like a little socialist Great Britain over there. And it's very unfortunate because they have the ability to actually be very prosperous and very successful. They just choose not to be. They choose to live off of someone else's money. They really like the nanny state. They whine about stuff and they expect to be given their bottle. And then when you try and spoon feed them actual food, they throw a hissy fit, they spit it out. It's like they don't ever want to grow up, but yet they like to make it seem like they know a lot. Well, obviously they don't if they're still wearing their diapers, so to speak, in terms of financial soundness. So I look at it from an auditor and a staff accountant point of view. It's like, okay, when are you going to grow up? That's what I ask. So that's what I was thinking when I saw this. I'm trying to remember. I'll probably think of it. Here's what usually happens. Whenever I can't remember something, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, that's what that was. And I'll think of the name and I'll go back to sleep. So more than likely around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I will probably sit up, wide awake, and think of what I was trying to say. But it's been several years since I saw that. But my point is this, in regards to Puerto Rico, they need to grow up. They've been living high off the hog for a long time. They're almost like Hawaii, but Hawaii is a state. But then again, they're Democrat. Hawaii, I don't even know how anybody lives there that's not a millionaire or a billionaire, because their real estate is so expensive. It's not realistic to live there, because I remember I interviewed for a couple of jobs there in Hawaii, and I almost got one. I almost got a job there, but I was looking at where am I going to live, because I like to live within a certain radius or circumference from my job. And I would basically have to live at a fancy hotel, because that was probably one of the closest things to where I would have been working as a staff accountant. And I was like, staff accountants make good money, but I would have to be married to a sugar daddy in order to live at this hotel. And I am not marrying a sugar daddy. That's really that's not one of my hobbies. That's not one of my goals. So I passed up on that opportunity, even though, I would love to live on a beach and have palm trees, and I think it'd just be so much fun. But, if something's not realistic, then it's just not realistic at that moment. But who knows? Maybe someday I will live there. But anyway, in regards to Puerto Rico, I think, I don't think Puerto Rico is listening to this podcast, but if you are, grow up, stop whining, start winning. I'm going to write a book called that. Stop whining, start winning. Because I think a lot of people need to grow up. And when I say people, I mean adults. Because, it doesn't make sense to tell a child to grow up, because they literally can't just yet. Like, they're growing. They have permission to grow. But, it's one of those things that adults, we should already be grown up. And it's important that adults behave the way they are supposed to behave, especially fiscally responsible people. I need to get another drink of water. Sorry, it's been so dry here in Oklahoma because it got really cold. Sorry, my voice. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico. I've never been there. But they need to be fiscally responsible, because here's another thing. If they would just be responsible and really focus on what they can afford, they could actually be way more successful and way more prosperous, but they choose not to be. And that always breaks my heart when people choose not to do the right thing. So it's like, well, I just think, why choose debt when you can choose wealth? Don't choose debt. Choose wealth. And, when you choose wealth, there are some sacrifices. There are some sacrifices that you make. But I look at it this way, that's just a weaning phase. Like, it's kind of like, like I would love to eat out every day. But number one, I don't want to pay that kind of money to eat out all the time. And number two, it's not always completely healthy. Like, I can find healthy things on any menu. But also, it's very expensive to go out all the time. And plus, I love to cook. But it's one of those things, like, when you're being fiscally responsible, that means that, you're not going to go to Starbucks every day and spend $3 to $5 on coffee. You can still do that like once a week. But when you cut back, that's when you realize how much money you were spending on something that is it's not a necessity. It's more like a treat. I think the problem with Puerto Rico is that they've gotten so used to living above and beyond their means and above and beyond necessity that they think these luxuries are necessities when it's not. So maybe they need to take Dave Ramsey's financial class. I'm trying to think what his class is called. Is it Financial Peace University? It's one of them. I've seen different, pieces of it. But I think Puerto Rico needs to take a page out of his book, because I don't think there's any excuse to be a financial failure. I really don't. Especially not an entire island or territory or, I'm sure they act like their own country. They act like they are their own country, even though they are not. But anyway, so that is it for this lovely podcast, talking about Actors Equity Association and a few tangents going off on that. But trying to look and see what is the next one. Let me go to my lovely list here. Oh, this should be interesting. The next one is going to be the Airline Pilots Association, the ALPA. That is really cool. And it was founded in 1931. That is really interesting. Okay, so we will do that next time. So as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, and that you're having a wonderful year. So thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.